All right, we did
All
it.
right. Hey, how's it going?
It's all good. It was just like the nicest weather. We were having a little chat, and then suddenly it was lightning, and now I don't see anything out of my window anymore. It's like intense.
Yes, it happens fast in the spring. Well,
Exactly.
let's jump into it. Welcome everyone to Pulse for Developers.
Yep.
It's Tim and I. What stream is this? This is number 3, right?
It's only
Um,
the third.
I know. But today we're going to talk about all things rich text editor. We'll
Oh
get
yeah.
into how you set it up. We'll get into some advanced configuration. We'll do a couple entries perhaps, and then we'll get into the code side and how the rich text editor content ends up on a front end.
Yeah, that's the fastest way anybody's ever spoken about a rich text. I love that.
I know it's a complex topic, and we get a lot of
Yes.
questions about it. So we thought we would do a stream about it.
Exactly. Because I don't know, probably like because of my role in developer experience, I work a lot with our customers and our partners, as well as developers in the community. And probably every meeting I have, like with a partner or a customer, the rich text comes up. And not in a bad way. It's just, hey, I want to do this. Can I do it? Or why does this work that way? Or don't you have this feature? And we're like, yes, we do. But this is just, it's a big topic. And so,
Right.
yes, it is just time for a stream where I think we'll just add it to a page. We go over all the options. We look at our extensibility, and then we just look at the code, because rich text is important for content editors, but it's equally important to developers. And if you don't do it right, your content editor can destroy your website. But also, the developer can set up some rules to really make the life of a content editor completely miserable. And so
Right.
we need to find our balance between, let's not make each other's lives, miserable, but kind of just what is the best way, to fight our battle here between editors and developers. It's
Right.
always like that, right? Yeah,
It
exactly.
is. It's definitely a push and pull, but you want to maximize benefits on both
Exactly.
sides because
Exactly.
then it helps, both content editors and developers be able to iterate, right? And innovate. And you can't do that if you're constantly sort of fixing and tweaking this one particular aspect.
Exactly. So let me just put my screen there. So
Yeah.
is this zoomed in enough? I hope it is, because it's huge on my screen.
I think
I
that
like
that's
this.
even better. Yeah,
All
let's do
right.
it.
So I just made, like, this is a super simple project. It's just a page content type with a title and a rich text editor on it, nothing else. And so when we actually have a look at like our properties here for the rich text editor, you can see, of course, there's all the default stuff that we always talk about. Your unique ID, your name. You might not want to call it this, but for the demo
Yeah.
purposes, it's kind of a lovely open door, shall we say.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's
Usually you would change that to like maybe content also, just like the unique ID or body or something that
exactly.
is a little bit more readable.
Yes. And so the first thing that's different than normal is what you find here. So there's this plugin. So it's a super extensible system. So when you hit this, there are a bunch of different plugins that you can actually get from our marketplace. So I, for example, set up a Cloudinary image picker. We have an AI assistant to help you write. You can create image presets for like crops and stuff. And you can see this is my own custom app even that I can put in. There's something you can set up with variables that where we won't go into that too deep today, but we will use, let's say, we'll use Cloudinary to just show you that you can actually have a lot of extensibility, and you yourself can code it as well for your project.
Right. And it
Uh,
would make sense that if you have a lot of assets to maintain, that you might choose to use an external asset manager.
exactly. You don't have to, but you can. And so
Yeah.
now when you go to advanced, now the fun begins. You can actually set the minimum and maximum height of this field, because if it's like not high enough, it's really awkward to edit in, right? So I just said it, I just want it always to be the max, which is 600.
100.
So even
Yeah.
when I open it, it has to be big, because I feel like I cannot breathe otherwise, editing. And so the editor has a bunch of types. And so let's just go to basics. And so when I do that, there's literally nothing you can change here. Like, this is the most
Yeah.
out of the box. And so this is also how you get it when you normally set it up. And um, for a lot of people using this is probably fine.
Yeah.
However, you can also go to advanced, and then you have all these basics, but you get like the basics of basic plus a few other things. Like you can suddenly insert images and videos and tables and links, but also we can now embed objects as well. And so embed objects is anything that's a content type in your system, you can actually add it. So I only have pages in this project. So I can actually reference a page inside my content editor now, which is, or in my rich text editor, which is really handy because you might want to link somewhere, let's say a blog post. Well, you don't have to
Right.
remember the URL. You just say embed as link, find the blog post, hit go. That's pretty nice.
It is, yeah. And especially like if you're doing something like a knowledge base, right? Like there may be other documentation or pieces of information that you would want to embed here, or anything like other content models, like you are embedding this sort of making it possible to embed the page, but it might be product, right? Maybe you want to embed some products.
Exactly, you can. And that's a question we get all the time. Like, hey, I'm writing like a behind the scenes of a certain product, and now I want to reference some other products, but not like in a list, but I actually want to have it in my copy. Well, you can use this. And then you might want to go and click on custom, and then you can do even more. Then you can
Yes.
actually completely curate what you want to show to content editors, which is actually pretty important. And so, Lo, you spoke about like these headers, right? Like, what did you mean with that?
So, in terms of accessibility, right, and curating an editor experience, in general, readability and sort of scanning, most people who read sort of blogs or articles or landing pages, they are scanning the information via the headline.
Yeah.
And in particular with that, when I'm configuring the rich text editor, I always deselect H1 because there should only ever be a heading 1 on a page. And that is really sort of it should be the main title and main theme of whatever entry you're making. It lets people know that within this content, I am going to find information about whatever the title tells me. And that's important for screen readers, but it's also just generally important for general outlining and readability. And,
additionally, SEO, like if you have two header, one text, Google says no, basically.
No. Yeah. Again, you're establishing one main theme in which you are talking about through that title.
Exactly. And so we have a bunch of other stuff like bold, underline, and you might want to remove a few things, but most of this is actually pretty handy to have like an inline code one, or like a video or an asset. Or if you have a bunch of stuff. And so, you know what? We'll just select it like this without the header one, because that actually makes sense. Of course, you can make it mandatory or non-localizable, but that's just all content stack stuff. So
right.
Let's save and close. Well, let's have a little look at, like you see, I have two page types, or one page type and two entries of type page. So let's just go to the home page. And of course, right now, I just put in test, but that's it.
Test.
There's nothing else.
Always
you need
test.
something, right? I just wanted to.
I have like 40 test pages in my stack.
It's how this goes, right? So there's a few fun things. Like it is this height of 600 by default now, even if it's empty, which is kind of nice. Like we could potentially say, well, let's change that and say, well, the default needs to be like 50 if it's empty, right? Let's say. I see now it starts just small. And I can make it bigger.
And it will expand. Yeah.
Exactly, which is pretty cool. And so you can also, of course, always expand and just kind of go full screen. And the people with the keen eye probably have seen that I installed a few plugins, right? So we have our Cloudinary here. We have our AI assistant here as well. And so when I write and I actually double click on this, I can actually say, well, AI assistant, please optimize my text. Obviously, this is kind of test. There's not much we can.
Yeah, there's not. It's like, what do you want from me? You only wrote test.
But that is pretty cool, right? So you could also add your own stuff here, which is kind of cool. And so let's just go over this. Like these are all the normal ones, right? So let me just start typing something. For example, this needs to be, of course, bold. So you get a pop-up here, but you can also, of course, just go from here, right? And the keyboard, everything works. And so there's all these other things that you can also turn off if you want. We might not want subscript here or whatever, right? And then you can also say, well, maybe let's not do this. Otherwise, like if you do this now, there's just an empty paragraph. And this can be by choice, or we can actually decide in code not to allow for that. So we'll look at code later, how we can actually control whatever comes out of this thing. And so here we can just say, well, there's no header 1, obviously, but we can make it a code snippet if we want, or we can make it a header 3. That's pretty cool, right? And so this has its default styling here, so you can at least see what you're doing. In your front end, you might change up that styling if you wanted to.
Yeah. And then the important thing to remember about headings too is you don't want to choose a heading just because you want a bigger font size, right? Like if you want more variability in your font size, that is something that needs to be controlled wherever you output that, right?
Exactly. And so let's see, we can make it lists. And you see that was pretty clean, right? So now it's no longer a heading 3 when you put it in a list, because HTML, that's just not correct HTML. And so it kind of just solves that stuff. And as far as I know, there's also a remove formatting button. So let's see if it does that. Well, it doesn't seem to behave. Maybe I have to select it. Certainly not. Well, there you go. That's rich text editor for you. We learn as you go. So, and then there's this other, like, these are the default stuff. This is what you have in Word, and you know this.
Yeah, default formatting.
But now it gets interesting. We can actually just select an image. And now, of course, it's huge, but you can just say, well, let's just make this small. And I can even edit some of the properties, right? So what you could choose to do, which we probably won't tell you you should, but what you could do is make it inline so you can have text flowing around it. Nowadays in modern design, we don't see that much. So I tend not to do it because it will add the image into a paragraph. So the image becomes an inline object in which text, can flow around inside the paragraph, which we used to do back in the day, but not really now. But you could actually, which is pretty cool, you can actually just have a different alt text here to another context where you use this image. And that is actually where it gets pretty important. So you have to do some of that stuff.
Right. And then this, the distinction with sort of adding assets to the rich text editor is if it's embedded, it will treat it as a reference. It's because that's what it is. It is you are referencing the image in the assets, folder or assets area. And that means it will dynamically update versus you just adding the image directly to the RTE. If you make changes to that asset in the assets pipeline or the assets model, it won't update in the RTE.
Exactly. And so that's interesting to know. And so I just click on video, and I'm just going to put the live stream to this in here. Let's see what that looks like. So we're like doing Inception, because we're looking at the same live stream as we're literally doing.
I know.
There we go. Oh, let's not hit play, by the way. That I should not have done that. Okay.
No.
So the fact is, you can just add this stuff, right? And so this is a special social embed that you can do. You can make a table. But also, and now it starts to become pretty interesting, let's embed an entry. Yes. So what I can do now is actually say, well, I have the homepage now. So let's add a link to the about page. And so I have now chosen to just embed the about page. But you can also create a new one, or you can actually link to an entry, which is pretty handy. But you can also embed an asset as a link. This is what you were just talking about, Lo.
Right.
And so, or you just do a normal URL. And so you can see if I hit edit here, it actually wants to go to the about page to now start editing, which is pretty nifty. How about now, let's just add a Cloudinary image as well. So later on in the code, I could show you how that actually works. So the other ones are kind of, that was a little error there in how I set it up, but those are super complex. Let's not go there now, because we have a lot to go over still. So this is my personal Cloudinary. So let's just select, You know what? Let's do a tote bag with a corgi on it with a hat on.
Yes.
Because why
Because who
not?
doesn't love corgis?
Look at this. And I'm just going to make it a little smaller. And you can see in this one, we can also do some editing here. And also, I personally don't want it to be like an inline one. So what we have done now, let's see. You know what? Let's keep this thing here. So what we have is a title with a bit of like, italic, bold, an image from our own library.
Mhm.
We have an embedded page from an entry reference. Then there's an empty line, and then there's an image from Cloudinary. Well, let's just hit publish and see how this actually looks on my page. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
And so,
Excellent.
Of course, I created like a local host quick code thing that queries that homepage entry and then does something with it, which obviously is what we're seeing here. So let's have a look at what this HTML actually looks like. And so this header 1 is coded in my front-end code. This does not come out of the rich text. And we tend to want to do that because header 1s are so important for SEO and page structure. We don't want to be touching that too much. So I coded that myself.
Yeah.
And here is our div. And there's a pre here that's empty now. I'll show you why after this. When we start to do code, we'll show you what comes out of the rich text editor and how you make that into HTML. Because actually, it doesn't output the HTML that you put in. It outputs JSON. And that might make it complex, but also super fun. Because suddenly you have all this ability of stuff that you can do in your front end. Anyways, so
yeah, that's what makes, like, JSON makes it essentially more and more flexible in terms of what you can do when you just
and more complex, but it does.
Yeah,
right?
But ultimately gives you more. It's a complex and strict structure that allows you the freedom to do just about anything on the front end.
Exactly. And so what you see here now is already going through that JSON goes to my code and I do something with it. And now we have HTML. We can also choose not to do anything with it. And then it just outputs default HTML from the package that we use. So what you see here now, this paragraph actually has its, emphasis, which is italic, and strong, which is bold. Then we have our image with a bunch of parameters. Like this is the alt tag that we set, right? I just typed something random.
Yeah, don't do that, folks.
No, in real life, please don't. Just please don't. However, you can also see loading, width and height, sizes, and a class name and a fetch priority. I added that myself because I found that is important. So later on, I'll show you in code how that actually works. Well, then we have our header 3. Then we have our empty line, which is not really something we want, but we can show later how to clean that up potentially. And then here we have our Cloudinary image, which actually has its URL. As you can see, this is a Cloudinary URL here. And it's just embedded, and it doesn't have an alt because I don't think we added it, let's say.
No, we didn't.
This is where it gets interesting. Like I can actually just type an alt here and get the alt from here. But if Cloudinary has an alt specified in the Cloudinary DAM, in the code, you can get that and apply it. So let's have a look later if I actually did that. And if not, we can still add it. And that's it. And so this was a relatively simple one, obviously. But if you look at, for example, the content stack documentation website, is all this is in there as well. You know what? How about we add like some, we can actually in this empty one do some code block or something.
Yeah, let's do a code block.
Of course, this now won't be a code block. Let's see what it outputs now. So if I just type HTML, I don't think it likes.
Oh, it strips it out.
I might have to refresh. This was a quirk we saw the other day.
Oh, there we go.
It did save it. Okay, so that's very interesting.
It is. Does it? Wow.
It actually renders the header 1 as an header. Wow.
Maybe we shouldn't show.
This was fully unexpected. I thought it was just write me a string.
Yeah, that's what I assumed too. Interesting.
Okay, so let's just make it a code block before, let's make it inline code. Let's see what it does now. I fully did not expect it, but just added
Me neither.
Okay, let's refresh. And so so it didn't basically. Very interesting. Okay, I'm going to have a look Maybe I shouldn't have done a header one. Maybe I should just do something like this, and it's inline code, right? You see, this is why does it, let me refresh. Okay, there it is. Okay, so now it didn't actually make that JavaScript, and it now said span data type inline code. Well, I think we might want to have that as a code tag, right? Or maybe even a pre tag. So what we can do later on is also have a look at like how we can solve that. Because, well, we can do something with this later on with our CSS or whatever, but it's kind of nicer if this actually becomes a code tag, because it is what it's exactly what that is.
And this is like possibly if you know that this is going to be a regular occurrence, you would want to control from that, from like creating a function to control that, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. So we could do normal text. Oh, didn't I say that this has to be normal text and not inline code? Okay. And now we do this as inline code. Let's see what it shows now. This pop-up, go away. So if I select something, okay. Code snippet is not what we need here. I think we need inline code.
Yeah.
We got its selection. Inline code.
The code snippet creates like a block. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, let's have a look what it did now. Okay, so we have the paragraph. Okay, there's our span with inline code. So this we probably want to have like a code block, right? So later on we can do that one. And let's add like an empty paragraph so we can also solve that one in the code later on.
Yeah, which, by the way,
here we go.
This is inspect in Google Chrome browser, but most modern browsers now have an inspect feature. And it's really great for debugging and looking at things like this.
Especially because this shows you the generated code, because you can also do this and basically see just the normal like view source, but that's a little challenging to look at. You can see, you can actually see that it's there, right? In the paragraph, because we're doing server-side rendering now. So this will just be the same as whatever we see in here. But if we had some fancy JavaScript that would change the DOM, this one shows that generated one as well, which is super handy. All right, so we have a look at the code now for how this all works.
Yes,
maybe
let's get into it.
A good way to start is just saying this JSON, or we call it also the JSON rich text editor for a reason. It outputs a JSON structure that represents HTML, and then you can hook into all these structures to say, this is what I want the HTML to look like. And if you don't push into it, or when you don't hook into it, the package from Content Stack will just create the HTML that it thinks is great. For example, this empty paragraph, because you wanted empty space, right? Well, maybe an empty paragraph does give you empty space, so maybe that's what you wanted. So this is the default here. That makes sense. I personally don't want it. So now I can make code for a p tag that if there's no content in it, it's not going to render it, for example.
Makes sense.
All right. So before I show all that, I'm just going to turn it off. So now this is what it looks like when it's turned off. This is actually what's coming out of our rich text element. And you can see it's the type of a document, and it has children inside. And so all these elements are children. And each child has like, it's like an object, like it's an array of children. And so there's a text, this is a space. And then there's another object that says, well, the text is rich, but it has to be italic.
Yeah, the attributes.
Exactly. And then there's a space with nothing. And then text editor has to be bold. Well, that's exactly a JSON representation of this thing, right? So we have, this is a rich text editor, italic, and then text editor is bold, and then the rest is normal. That's exactly, this is just a little language to say, do with this what you will, render some HTML with it if you want. And of course, Content Stack has an NPM package in its, as a package on its own. but that package is also loaded in our delivery SDK. So you can just grab it and work with it.
Right.
Sorry, go on, Lo.
I was just going to say, also, if you want to see your JSON output, you can install the developer tools from Marketplace, and it will show you the JSON of all fields in your entry.
Exactly. Let's crack on with this for a sec, but later on we might be able to.
We might be able to show it. Yeah,
exactly. And so the interesting bit here is that we actually, as Contentstack, created this package as standalone as well. So if you have HTML and you want to have this HTML, let's say it's on WordPress or something, and you want to move it into Contentstack, this package also does HTML to JSON, and then your rich text field can just be filled with that JSON from your old HTML, which is pretty nifty. You can also do it with Markdown if you want to, but that's a little deep for now. We're talking about the basics, but so it's really quite flexible. So then the next element, if we have a look, is actually our image. And so it actually says it's a type of reference because an image lives as a separated element somewhere that you connect to your page. So we've now connected this this asset, which is here. This asset has now been connected to this entry in the rich text. So that's why this is a reference. And you can actually see there's like a UID and the URL, the title, all the things we might need, even with the styling applied that we actually, this is that styling that's applied, right?
Yeah.
So it remembers that.
And it can seem sort of convoluted or complex about why images, embedded assets, why would that be a reference? Why isn't it just in there? But it makes sense if you know and you want to go in and you change that original image in the assets, right? It will update everywhere. And that's what you want.
If you go now here and you actually say, well, can I just replace this thing with something else? That will then also be reflected inside your rich text, which is, that's super handy. That's what you want. Because data is a graph. Okay, but that's too deep for now. But
yeah, let's not get into theoretical stuff right now.
The image reference doesn't have text or children, but so it just says it's nothing. So then our next reference is actually that page, right? So we selected the about page.
The about page, yeah.
And so that's another reference in the type of block, and it's an entry, which is our about page entry, which is this one. And it has a bunch of like little CSS classes that it gives it by default that we might not use. But the most important part is entry UID. As you can see, there's no title or descriptor or anything in here yet. There is, like, the moment we morph this into HTML through whatever functions we have, it actually queries it for you and gives you that based on the fact that you say in your query, include my embedded items, please. The moment we use JSON to HTML to make HTML happen and you have this, it will query it for you. So that's super handy.
Right. And that's all from the utils SDK, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we'll show you in a sec. Then our next part. What is our next part? Oh, this is the about page. Let me just go to the home page again. So then we have normal text with our inline code and normal text, and then another Cloudinary image. So normal text. And then there's the text in alert 1, and it says inline code is true. So that's exactly that bit. And then here is the Cloudinary one. Oh, that's fun. This is actually that empty paragraph.
It is, yeah.
There's just a nothing. So, and then there's Cloudinary. And so this is the type Cloudinary because it's an installed marketplace app. So it's not type reference or type block. It's type Cloudinary. And all these attributes that are in here are given by the Cloudinary integration. So you get its URLs, width and height. You can do all the kind of fun stuff that you would normally do with Cloudinary. We also have this for Binder, for example. There's a bunch of different ones here. I actually have a config label in there but this is actually Cloudinary metadata. You're getting a bunch of fun stuff here. And that's
when you embed like a external image, like from Cloudinary or somewhere else, does it bring the image over in the original size that you put it in there, like just originally, without you controlling for it or transforming
it? You can choose that, of course. Like this is, I think, the original from Cloudinary itself.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also this extra little style thing that comes out of Contentstack.
Okay.
So I actually, when I maybe change this up, let's see what comes out of content stack. Or even maybe I might have actually had to wait. Is there anything here I should type? No. Okay, well, let's just do our own alt. Let's see what's coming back from content stack
Yeah.
here. Okay, so you see our own alt is added now. And the
And then the
maximum width is
max width is
128 pixels. So you get
Yeah.
this from content stack. But the original, oh, this is interesting. The attributes coming from Cloudinary are actually also updated somehow. I did not expect this
Interesting. So it transforms
because
on.
this public
Yeah.
ID also kind of looks different than I would
Yeah.
consider it normally to be. So I think content stack is adding a little bit of additional data and juice on top of whatever they use.
Yes.
Which is fine, but we can be opinionated because you don't really have to use these, because as you know, when we just go to the Cloudinary image here, this URL of it is just its original. You see, that's huge.
Yeah.
So what you should probably use this for is say, hey, now I know my ratio, so I know it's a square, and based on that you can do whatever you want.
Right.
All right, enough talking. Let's have a look at whatever that code looks like. So now let's go back to this. And now suddenly, oh, you see, it actually rendered it like super small. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's make it bigger again. The fact that it's that like responsive to it, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There we go.
Because I think too, because it sets the exact height and width, and then you also give it a max width, so it's never going to go past.
Yeah, and so we can change that in code. So let's first
Yeah.
look at what I've done now in this code, and then we just add some other stuff just for funsies. So
Let's go for it.
essentially what you do is you query your page. And so in my page HTML here, I just have get page please for this UID, which is this UID. So I just query that, and then I get page, and then I just show the HTML like this, because what I get back now, it has HTML. And so
dangerously set inner HTML.
yeah, there's no other way. Well, there is another way, but that's too deep for this stream.
Yeah, let's not get into
What
it.
you could potentially do is that JSON that we just looked at, you can parse that in React, and then for all the things that you encounter, you just make a React component and render it like that. You can of course also do that, but this now actually just returns an HTML string that you can just embed like this. So what we have is you just query the thing. Of course, we talked about the include embedded items because, it's nice to be able to fetch that stuff. And then if there's a result that comes back, we can actually use our utility functions for JSON to HTML, and you just give it that entry. And so in this case, I called this result. I could also just call this the entry that I got back. And then
got to change it every
whatever. Yeah. So I just call it result. And so, but it needs an entry point. And I've used some TypeScript here. You don't have to. I just did it. And then so the path is content. What this means is this is the name of the field inside your schema. So if you have two rich text fields, it could also be number 2. Right? So now if I had two rich text fields in here, it would do everything for both. So that's pretty nifty as well.
Yeah.
So you can just tell it, hey, which rich text field you do want to do something with. And then you have this render option. And so this is essentially, this loops over that, or this function loops over that JSON. And then it says, you can now override what I do for a link, or you can override what I do for a Cloudinary image.
I don't think I've ever asked you this, Tim, but how do you feel like always setting like your A tag or your link tag as target blank, like meaning it always opens in a new tab? Are you for or against it?
Against. But everybody's different. I'm one of those people that I want to decide what I do with my personal tabs, and I never have browsers with lots of tabs open. Then there are other people that have 16,000 tabs open and are fine.
You mean me?
I didn't say anything. As long as your computer has enough memory. Like, I'm one of those people that when there's like a notification, I have to clear it, one of those.
Yeah.
So if I really want to open a tab to remember it and do something with, I will, and then close it. So
Yes.
no target blank for me unless I just click like third mouse button and then it opens in a new tab. But
I see. Yeah.
if you wanted in your website that everything always opens in a new tab, you would do this.
Yep. Blank.
And now every link from your rich text will always open in a new tab. So you have that control.
Yeah.
And so I did this because I wanted this one for Google.
Yes.
That's why I added this. But if you potentially have something like Next.js and you want to make this a next link so it can actually prefetch stuff that you might want to link to, you can make this a next link here.
Yeah.
So you can really choose what you do with that stuff. And so you get the node, and then you get the next is like a function because it just now loops over all the children, because potentially there might be more children in this A tag. Of course, you don't want that because it's an A, it's inline, but it could be possible. So that's why you use that function.
Right.
And so if it encounters another link in here, it just renders this again. That's what that next is. So it just loops over the children to do the same render option. So my next one here is like you can have block level and inline level elements inside your rich text. And so in our case, that page reference that we have to the about page is a block level one. And here I just get the entry. And so I even console log it. So we can actually have a look there if you want.
Yes. Let's look at the
So
console.
that's this. And so I'm actually getting my title about page and its UID. But when we looked at that JSON before, you didn't get that like title and all these other things like the published details and whatever, because or even its children, like you wouldn't get this content because that only works if you fire this thing off. So if we don't do this, it becomes JSON again, right? And then it's only like this is this is the image. So this is our reference, and you only get the entry ID. That's it.
Right. It doesn't dereference it, so you don't get all of.
It doesn't. Basically, it does nothing. It just says this is the thing you referenced, and then the moment you use this function, it actually in the background queries it for you, and you get all this information. And funnily enough, this content field in our about page is also rich text, right? And so that JSON that we were just looking at for the homepage, I have it here for the about page. And so I could even run that same functionality again to just render this whole about page with its rich text right here. But I chose to only just do the header.
You just wanted the title for now.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, sorry, the title. Yeah, so a header 3. But I could potentially now do other stuff here with whatever is in that entry. Like if it has an image attached, you can show that here. So then we have Cloudinary. And so let's just have a look at what we just saw the JSON for Cloudinary, right? And so I'm just grabbing whatever in these attributes is width and height, its URL and its alt. And that's showing. And of course, you can do all the fun Cloudinary stuff here with the source if you wanted to, right? You can add like the quality or the file type settings or any fancy stuff Cloudinary gives you. You can do that here. And if you set it up slightly differently than this, you can also use like the React Cloudinary component that you might have installed and do whatever you want with it. You just give it the attributes.
Yeah, basically any attributes that you can change in Cloudinary, you can pull that down on your front end with this.
Yeah. And so then the last one I did is for display, which is actually either an embedded item or an entry node. And so here I showed you, like this one is slightly more complex just to show you, right? So for a display, which is just the normal image in Content Stack, that's this one. I have a little function that says create inline article image. Okay, sure. So what does that do? So I give it the asset and the metadata. And so I create like my base URL, and that can come from different places. So I kind of just figured out if I have this one, sure, let's grab that. Otherwise, it might be from other stuff. And so this is just because data can look slightly different. And so then I created, so I click the link to the image and I add a bunch of stuff here. Because Content Stack has all these formatting options to like, let's make it an AFIF with quality 90 and don't upscale, please, but make it 800 by 450. Like you can choose that in Content Stack. And so I just, you know what, like for all my images in my rich text, I want this.
Right.
So I kind of just hard code that, add the link, and then make my own image tag for it. Like the thing is, I don't have to do this, right? Like if I don't, it will still render the image, but then whatever comes out of the npm package, which is slightly different, but not too much. So as you can see, well, let me just make it slightly like this one has an alt and a source. That's it. Well, mine, if we actually look at it, I do a bunch more: loading lazy, sizes, a class, fetch priority. So now you see, I just refreshed, and now I have all the things that I wanted to have. So you can completely choose how you render this stuff.
Right. And it makes sense because sometimes you use images for different purposes, right? So you would want to control the size. Like, let's say that you wanted
Exactly.
more of a hero image and you had a defined sort of component to do that with. You would control the size of that versus, oh, this is just an image that accompanies, a paragraph that I wrote.
Exactly that. And so let's have a look at, well, didn't we add like an empty image, an empty paragraph? Maybe we can.
I think so. Was it in the about page or the home page?
No, well, let's. Oh, it doesn't seem like we have it. So let's add some of that. Let's say. So I can just grab some code I have in another project to quickly steal. And okay, so now you can see there's a bunch of empty paragraphs. And I personally don't like having these because it's kind of like, hey, they have a margin for if there's text. I kind of added a margin. And so you see there's like these weird empty lines, but margin without content in it sometimes doesn't work, as you can see. This one is much bigger than this. So let's remove those. So I have another function here somewhere that I coded recently in my render option for paragraphs. So let me just, well, we're not going to grab everything, but we start small. Let's start small. So for paragraphs, let's remove this stuff. I think it should probably be this. I'm just adapting from whatever I had.
Yeah.
Before. So for every paragraph that I find, I have node and next, right? If my children, my first child inside this paragraph is nothing, just return nothing. And otherwise, return the paragraph itself with whatever children are inside.
Children. Yeah.
Let's have a look what that looks like now. So now, you see, there's just a paragraph with the D inside, and the other ones are gone because they were empty.
Right.
So if I remove this, they're all back now. And so if there are children, it renders that into P. But I can also just say, we can just do some fun stuff here, whatever. I can, if I have some fancy stuff I want with my P tag, I can add that, as you can see. But it adds it to all of them because also the empty ones. So I can just say, you know what? I don't want these empty ones. Right. And so now, if you know this, you can clean up a bunch of stuff.
Right. And this is the kind of thing that really sort of improves editor experience, right? Like It seems small, but it's really like if you have empty P tags, that can be very frustrating when you're entering content. And then if you know that you want that to be stripped out, you can do it sort of globally. So it just doesn't happen.
This is just cleanup. But there's also this other one where sometimes when you're editing something and you do something maybe like this, and you do like what all these developers always do, right? When you add this, then this needs to become a code block.
Right.
So now we have two ways of doing a code block. So we have this one, but we also actually have it in line here. So let's publish this and let's make both of those a code block. Because this is what I was facing when sometimes it loses this, it loses itself. So I have to refresh and then probably we're back now.
There we go.
When I ported all my articles from my old website to my new one in Content Stack, I had this all over the place. So it's like, okay, so this is a weird artifact of something I did in the past. Can we now make this something that works? And so let's first have a look at how we do that inline one. And I think in this utils one, I actually have this somewhere. You see, there's this code thing. And so let's see I wonder if this one is doing the inline code one or not. It might actually not. This might be only code blocks. Yeah, because you have code blocks at block level and inline level, right? Let's just add it and see what this does.
Let's see. Yeah, let's see what happens.
I don't think this will do it. No, it's not likely. I think this is more for like, okay, so this is not for the inline code. This is for like the code block. So what we
block.
can potentially do is, well, why don't we just, let's grab this and say, okay, I want a code snippet with this in it. Let's see if it does it now. Let's publish.
There we
And
go.
let's have a look at what this is. And you see, pre-code. So it did it. So this was actually a code in a block level. So it found, okay, I have a block level code. Let me just add a pre and a code. And so what happens if I don't do this on my own? What does content stacks? Okay, so it's the normal package just renders code.
Code.
And I wanted a pre around it. Right? And so it doesn't look that much different now, but imagine that, oh, it actually has a double one. That's very interesting.
Huh.
That might just be my stuff going on here. The thing is, the fact that if you have the opportunity to change this, if you have syntax highlighting on your blog, for example, this is where you inject that. Here you can add like a JavaScript function that does syntax highlighting for you. You put it on, and then now all your code blocks have syntax highlighting. But in here, you don't need to know any of that. It just works. Right. And so those are pretty interesting things. And so maybe, well, time is flying. We only have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Should we have a look if we have like this some weird custom thing? If we can solve that one as well?
Yeah, let's do it. You
So
want to
there-
handle the backticks?
Yeah. So let's handle the backticks, because let's say you have some sort of historical thing that you moved over and you kind of want to clean that up. Well, let's do that here. And I also have that in because this is the code for my personal site. You can see there's a bunch of additional things that I do. And so here I have this function, replace backticks in object, because in this paragraph, potentially, there could be 20 of those with the backticks. Right. And so we kind of need to find all the places where there are these backticks, and add like a code block instead. And so, well, let's first just grab this and put it in here. Well, now it's going to just bork and not work because I don't have these functions, but we're just going to copy paste them. And so this function is a little intense, so we won't go too deep. But what this does, it loops over all the potential children this HTML DOM node can have. And it finds, if it's an object, I'm just going to loop over it. And if I find that it becomes a string, so I'm just going deeper, deeper, deeper. Oh, now it's a string. Let's see if there's backticks, yes or no. And if so, then there's another function it fires. And it fires itself all the time until it finds, oh, now it's a line instead of an array with 4 lines of children in it.
Right.
If you know React, children is very normal. But in this case, let's just not go too deep.
And then you're just having that string go directly into a p tag, right?
Yes, exactly. And so then once it becomes a line, then there's this replace backticks with code tags. So that's yet another function, which is very simple, right? It just finds all the backticks in that string globally and replaces it with code. And so even though this looks quite daunting, this is a relatively simple example of it. And you see there's normal text. Now it's code, normal text. And so in this paragraph, it just replaced those 2 backticks with code.
Yep.
And now I have kind of solved that, because in my CSS, I can just do some fun stuff for code, like, well, we can do that. Maybe we can say, let's see. Whoa, that worked for 1 second and then it stopped working. Oh, no. Oh, that might not be interesting.
No, it's.
You know what? We
Is
just do
it
it
color?
Like yeah, I was like this little example I have has Tailwind 4. So it might just be like, okay, I don't like that. There you go. So I just went back to normal CSS and it works. And so essentially now I can just do whatever I want with that code. And so if we have like additional ones that actually have these backticks, let's see what this does now. Interestingly, that did not work, because this is so much. Okay, welcome to rich text editing. It just saw, and it also, I published and it just gone. Let me refresh. It just saw I used the backticks and it made it an
Yeah.
inline code block for me by default.
Automatically.
But on this one,
Yeah.
it didn't. And so this is sometimes when you're dealing with rich text a little bit, it's like it's super smart. But in this case, I didn't want it to be smart, but it did. And so what we might have to figure out is like, okay, so now this one, it made a code block with my own fancy code, right? But then this one is now this span data type inline code again, the thing that we saw before. And so what we might need to do is actually go back here and say, you know what? We have block, right? But we can also go for inline. And then we just need to figure out, so not page here, not AI, stop it. We just have to go to the docs.
Consult the docs, folks.
Here we go. I think this one, we'll just open both. So we also have it on NPM with like some fallback documentation here, but I think, oh yeah, so this one goes slightly deeper because this is the package on its own, where you can also say, oh, I want to go from HTML to JSON as well, all that blah, blah. Well, we don't have to go there, but we can go here. Is this it? Let's see. Yeah, this doesn't give me too much, maybe here. Oh, it goes here directly.
Directly to the package.
Let me have a look, because I recently found a really good doc that actually showed me like a bunch of options as well.
That you could just cut and paste the snippet, or copy and paste the snippet.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can find it now. Oh, wait, here, maybe here. I wish I just had this, like, I could just have it saved. Okay, so this is not, so this seems like more users that use it. Wait, yeah, maybe this is it. Or were we just here?
I think we were just there, right?
Yeah, let's
Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, this one, I think. Nope. We will get there. I promise. And now it just gives me the benefits. Okay, you know what? For now, it is fine. What this thing, well, what we should find is, it's probably something like, inline code or something. But yeah, maybe we should not be guessing this, but documentation is sometimes hard to find. Well, you know what? Maybe this is it. Or it's starting to work now, like, because of course, I don't think it knows what this is.
Yeah.
Not compatible. Yeah, it just doesn't know what inline code is. Would Copilot be able to find out?
I don't know. I don't trust it.
It just does inline. No. This is definitely not it. So it could just be code, because it's code that's inline. It also is not happy with that. Anyways, you probably get the gist of how you could make that happen, right? This is, so you have lots of these options to do stuff with. And so we're nearing the end here of our stream.
We are. And I think one of the things I'll just add really quickly before we jump off is like setting up these render options sort of in this way, right? Like doing it programmatically also helps editors be able to actually live preview or visual build this, right? Like, so if you control these render options, you can really sort of help editors in terms of previewing it beforehand. They don't even have to go in the browser. They can see it right there inside of the CMS.
Exactly.
Romina says
we have
hi.
Romina.
Hi,
Romina. Put it back on.
How are you?
Yeah, so Romina, this is the moment. We were actually looking at the docs and we couldn't find what we were looking for. We might need your help. Anyways, so Romina is an incredible docs writer. What I still wanted to say is, like, I didn't build that into my little app now, but all this also works with Visual Preview and Visual Builder.
Yep.
Right. So if you wanted to edit your rich text in the CMS, you can directly see that update in your front-end code as well, which is very interesting. I just didn't set it up for this one, but that's trivial to do. And so then you can even see how the CSS looks on your own website when you start editing stuff. And I think that's about it. We spoke 55 minutes about rich text. How about that?
Yes. And we could talk several hours more because rich text editors are very complex.
Yeah,
Very
and,
few of them work the same.
and this one actually works pretty well because the
Yeah.
JSON that comes out is super stable. It's always the same. We always know how it works, which makes this super cool. And if I had found that docs page, we would have relatively easily actually put in that little code thing that we were just talking about. Maybe my next project will be to build a whole page just with rich text, no other stuff, just to see if I can pull it off. I probably can.
Yeah. Well, yes, but also still have a title field.
Maybe have, okay, sure, if you want to.
You know how I am, Jim.
Yes,
I'm like,
you're
you
right.
always have a title field.
All right. So thanks for watching, everyone. Do we have a little banner for our Discord? I think
We
we do.
do.
How about that?
So we have a Discord community. Please join it. We're doing lots of activities. We do live stream. We do open office hours. We have some fun things coming up, like a raffle, all sorts of stuff. And we're doing lots more programming. But again, you can go to community.contentstack.com and the Discord invite is there, and then you can join the community. We'll be in there. You can talk to us. You can talk to other folks from Content Stack and other fellow Content Stack users. So
Yeah,
join
so
the community.
all our tech people are in there. So any question you have, we will likely be able to find an answer. And so this is like one of those safe spaces. Any question goes. This stream felt like a safe space because I had a few frustrations, and who cares? We work together.
Yeah.
We learn together, right?
That's the best way.
All right. Cheers, everyone. See you soon.
All right. Bye.
All right.
Take care.
This is